Gunfire split the morning like the sky itself had cracked open. 5 shots, then silence. Smoke drifted through the still air, curling around the dying embers of what had once been peace. By the time the echoes faded across the canyon, the only thing left standing was a man in a torn brown coat, his revolver trembling in his hand, and the ghost of something he could never name. He rode hard that day, not toward safety, but away from memory. The horse beneath him, a gray roan with a scar on its neck, panted beneath the weight of dust and guilt. The man, 35, sunburnt and hollow-eyed, carried no name worth remembering. Folks once called him kind, then cruel, then nothing at all. He'd learned early that the West never cared for men who hesitated between the two. By dusk, he reached the edge of a river so quiet it might have been the last one left in the world. He dismounted slowly, knees shaking from days without rest. His reflection in the water looked older than he felt, like someone who had died once already. He drank, not for thirst, but to feel something that wasn't regret. That's when he heard it. The faint murmur of drums and the low hum of voices carried on wind. Across the clearing, smoke rose from a small Apache settlement, half hidden behind the reeds. The smell of cedar and corn drifted through the air. He almost turned his horse and left. Trouble always found him faster than peace ever could. But something held him still. Maybe it was the sound of laughter, soft, distant, human. A child saw him first and ran shouting into the camp. Within moments, the quiet turned sharp with suspicion. From behind the fire came warriors, bows drawn, faces stern as carved stone. The man didn't reach for his gun. He simply lifted his hands, palms open, dust falling from his skin like confession. An old chief stepped forward, his eyes deep with both age and understanding. Behind him stood a young woman, no more than 28, dressed in white doeskin threaded with blue beads. Her hair was long, her face calm but unreadable. She watched him not with fear, but with the heavy patience of someone who had seen too many strangers cross her world and leave it in ruins. He spoke first, his voice rasping from disuse. "Just passing through." The chief answered with silence, then a nod toward the fire. A gesture of mercy, or curiosity. The cowboy sat, and the woman poured water into a wooden bowl, placing it before him without a word. He drank, eyes lowered, feeling the burn of their gaze on his back. Night crept in quietly. The tribe's songs began low and slow, like prayers stitched to the rhythm of the earth. The man lay awake, listening. Every note tugged at something inside him he thought long dead. Across the fire, the woman worked with steady hands, grinding herbs, binding a child's cut. The moonlight traced her cheekbones in silver. When she finally looked his way, their eyes met, briefly, wordlessly. It wasn't desire, not yet. It was recognition. Two souls marked by the same emptiness. The next morning, he woke to the scent of smoke and the sound of distant hooves. Not the calm rhythm of grazing ponies, this was chaos, the thunder of riders who meant harm. The chief's men shouted warnings. Children ran. He rose before thinking, instinct sharpening his pulse. The bandits came fast, dust clouds swallowing the sun. They were land thieves, drunk, loud, careless with bullets and laughter. He had seen their kind before, had once ridden among them. Gunfire tore through the camp. The chief shouted orders, arrows flew, screams cut the air. The cowboy drew his revolver and stepped into the open. His body moved with the terrible grace of memory. He fired once, twice, again, his shots precise, protective, desperate. The woman, the chief's daughter, was dragged toward a wagon. He saw her struggle, saw the fear she refused to show. And something inside him broke loose. He ran, no thought of survival, only movement and purpose. A bullet struck his shoulder. He kept going. Another grazed his ribs. Still, he moved. The third tore through his thigh. He stumbled but did not fall. When the fourth hit, he reached her, pulling her behind him, shielding her as gunfire rained like steel rain. The fifth bullet found his chest. The world tilted. He dropped to one knee, breath ragged, blood thick in his throat. The bandits hesitated, startled by the sight of a man who refused to fall. The tribe rallied, surging forward in a cry that split the sky. Arrows flew like fire. The attackers broke, retreating in panic, leaving dust and death behind. When the noise faded, the woman knelt beside him, pressing her trembling hands against his wounds. He could barely see her through the haze, but her voice reached him, soft as water. She whispered words he didn't understand, though their meaning sank deeper than language. He tried to speak, failed, then managed a hoarse laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Told you. Just passing through." Her tears fell on his face, salt and sorrow. The chief, wounded but standing, approached slowly, laying a hand on the cowboy's brow as though blessing a fallen warrior. The others gathered around, silent, reverent. Above them, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of gunpowder and sage. The sky stretched endlessly blue, uncaring, infinite. The cowboy's eyes fluttered, caught somewhere between life and leaving. And just before darkness claimed him, he saw her face, calm, fierce, alive, and understood that maybe, for once, he had ridden in the right direction. The boom of thunder tore through the desert, though the sky held no clouds. It was the echo of memory, gunfire carried by wind and guilt. The cowboy awoke to it, gasping, clutching at the hole in his chest where life had nearly drained away. His body ached like rusted metal, and for a moment, he thought death had been merciful and passed him by. But then he felt warmth, a hand pressing against his ribs, steady and alive. Noya's face hovered above him, weary yet resolute. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, beads clicking softly as she leaned closer. He could smell the earth on her skin, the smoke of healing fires. Around them, the tent whispered with movement. Footsteps, murmurs, the slow heartbeat of a tribe holding its breath. He tried to rise, but her palm pressed lightly against his chest. "Rest," she said, her voice quiet but immovable. He obeyed, because in her tone was something that commanded not with force, but with faith. Days blurred. Fever burned him in waves, and in his delirium, he saw the faces of men he had killed, the women who had turned away, the ghost of his own youth galloping through the dark. Each time he fell back into the abyss, Noya's voice pulled him out, soft as the sound of rain on canvas. She fed him broth made from roots, tended his wounds with hands that trembled only when she thought no one saw. When the fever finally broke, he woke to the hush of dawn. She was sitting outside the tent, her back straight, eyes fixed on the pale horizon. The chief, frail and wrapped in a blanket, sat beside her. The two spoke in murmurs that blended with the wind. He caught only one word repeated, "Brother." When she returned, she smiled faintly and said the chief believed the earth had chosen him to bleed for them. He laughed weakly, his voice cracked. "I didn't choose it," he said. "Maybe it chose me first." In the following days, he learned to walk again, leaning on a staff carved from mesquite. Children followed him, wide-eyed, whispering tales about the white man who took 5 bullets and lived. Some reached out to touch his coat like it carried magic. He never corrected them. He didn't want to ruin wonder in a world that had so little of it left. Noya walked with him sometimes, along the riverbank where reeds swayed like old prayers. She told him how her mother had died when she was young, how her father had raised her to believe the earth listened to those who acted, not those who begged. He told her about towns where men drank to forget their mothers' names, about friends buried in shallow graves without markers. The stories bled together until there was no boundary between his pain and hers. Somewhere between silence and speech, something grew, slow, unhurried, sacred. But peace is a fragile thing in a land built on blood. One evening, as the sky burned with the color of dying fire, a messenger arrived. Another tribe had been raided. White settlers were pushing deeper into Apache lands. The chief gathered his people, his voice calm but edged with exhaustion. War was coming again. The cowboy stood at the edge of the circle, listening. He knew that look in the chief's eyes. It was the same one that had haunted his own reflection before he'd found this place. The look of a man who knows he's already lost too much. That night, he sat by the dying fire while Noya tended to her father. He wanted to tell her he would stay, that he'd fight beside them, that this time he wouldn't run from what mattered. But when he saw her kneeling beside the old man, tears shining like dew in her eyes, the words refused to come. Instead, he reached for his hat, feeling the weight of silence settle over him like ash. Before dawn, he saddled his horse. The village slept, bathed in silver light. He left behind the staff, the beads she had given him, everything except the ache she'd carved into his chest. But as he rode out, a voice broke the stillness. Noya stood by the river, her white dress rippling in the wind. She didn't call his name. She only raised her hand and said softly, "Wherever you go, the wind will know." He wanted to turn back, to tell her that for the first time, he understood what home meant. But the horizon was calling, cruel and endless. He rode on, tears stinging his eyes, until the world blurred into gold and shadow. Behind him, the sun rose. Somewhere, the drums began again, not songs of mourning, but of remembrance. He felt them in his bones, in the ache where 5 bullets still slept. And for the first time in a long while, he smiled, because maybe bleeding for something true was the only kind of living that ever mattered.